So reading chapter 4, the first part. Chapter 4, Alassian Born, Waking. The cream white sky was flat and even. There was in it a round bulge that was whiter than the rest, and was glossy with reflected light. On this lustrous bulge were painted darker shapes, sharp, but crammed together, difficult to distinguish. He watched them patiently, blinking slowly. On the leftmost side of the bulge was a white rectangle, brighter than the rest, with straight dark shades as its two vertical sides. Inside the rectangle were other smaller forms, some dark and some bright, all white. He guessed this rectangle was an opening in the sky to some place with light. It could be a door or a window, or perhaps it was a gate. He did not know. He studied the opening for long, thinking that in doing so, he may be able to see where it led. The more he stared at the shapes inside the square on the glossy bulge which swelled out of the otherwise flat surface of the sky, the more the shapes seemed to slip off suddenly, sliding downward. Yet always they remained in place. They stayed where they were and did not fall down. Across from the bright rectangle, on the other half of the smooth bulge, nothing could be seen. With the passing of time, the shiny white surface became grey. It was still shiny, but turned darker, and the sky became darker. However, it was not a sky, but a ceiling, a white, even ceiling. From the corner of his eye, he caught a movement, and with a gasp, he turned his face to look. There was a Falin there, sitting on a chair, gazing toward him. He held his breath and kept still. The Falin remained still. So he made to get up, and his muscles tore all at once. The pain forced a groan from him and crushed him back down. He stared at the Falin in horror. His body refused to move. He could do nothing but wait for the Falin to come to where he lay helpless and hurt and beat him. He waited and watched the Falin, and the Falin watched him. A moment passed, and still the Falin watched him. He was not coming to him. Instead, he was just sitting there, watching. "You are safe now," the Falin said. Was he talking to him? Why would he talk to him? No, he wasn't. No one talked to him. Again he struggled. His body felt heavy, terribly, terribly heavy. "You're among friends," the Falin said, looking at him. There was no doubt that he was looking at him. Though why would he look at him and speak? Speak to him? Was he speaking to him? "We have rescued you," he said. "Your captors are dead. You're among friends now. You are safe. You have nothing to fear. Don't try to get up. You are still weak. Your body needs time to recover. Calm now. You're going to be all right. There is no need to fear. I'm just sitting over here, see? I will not harm you." He fell back, aching all over, puffing and puffing. He kept his eyes on the Falin, who had yet to move from the chair, a strange chair with thin silvery legs and fat green pillows. His clothes, too, were odd, colored in grey and brown shapes and blotches, a squarish top with short sleeves, long trousers, an outlandish hat, and clumpy brown boots. He was warrior built, with strong shoulders and a lean body and toned, veiny forearms. His pure white hair was tied at the back, and a thin tail rested over his left shoulder, dropping down into his lap. His face was sharp, his expression calm. The tiny pupils of his ivory eyes were intense and watchful. If he looked into those eyes, they looked right into his. The Falin did not speak now. He was sitting in his strange chair, displaying no intention of doing anything but simply continue to sit there. Propped against the chair were two beautifully crafted swords, sheathed in black wood, slender and gently curved, one a little shorter than the other. Their guards were thick bronze discs with polished small figures carved in relief. The hilts were of the same polished metal, with sharply raised lines that spiraled and crossed. The guards' carvings depicted small trees with miniature figures underneath, difficult to distinguish. He stared at them until he saw, beneath the bronze trees, forest cats with bronze furs sit and lie and stand and run, slim and wild-looking, with a familiar grace. Had he seen them before? The same wild cats beneath the same small trees? He squinted at the Falin. Why was he sitting there? Who was he? What was this place? He looked around in alarm. He was in a small room with bare walls, a closed door, and opposite it a window with open brown curtains filled with empty grey sky. He was lying in a bed covered with white sheets and a blue blanket. Nearby were strange objects, white and metallic, with bumps and cords. The cords went from the strange objects to the bed and under the covers. He pulled back the sheets and from the back of his hand wrenched a long needle. A drop of blood rushed from his skin. Don't touch that! From his chest he plucked 4 threads with sticky round heads. Then in horror he clasped the thing that was digging a hole in his belly. He was about to pull it out when the Falin took his hands and wrestled him down on the mattress. He fought to get free, but the Falin's grip was steely. You'll hurt yourself if you do that. Stop struggling. Look at me. Hey, look at me. He looked. Then a second voice spoke, hard and crisp. What it said was a jabber of inarticulate noises. Behind the Falin appeared not Alassian, human, a man-human with black hair and full eyes. The Falin snapped his head toward him and barked something in the same incomprehensible jabber. His eyes narrowed to slits. The man backed away. I will let you go if you stop struggling, the Falin said, looking down again. But you will not touch that, or you will hurt yourself. Look at me. Yes? Show me that you understand. Nod if you understand. You will not pull that out because that would hurt you. Do you understand? Good. Then he was let go. He tried to lie very still and be quiet, but he was out of breath and could not stop panting. I know it looks frightening, the Falin said, but it is nothing to worry about. That is how we gave you food, because you would not eat and needed help, you see? It will be gone when you are able to eat again, soon. You will be all right. Do not worry about that now. The human said something, and the Falin turned to speak with him. He watched them talk, and in time got his breathing under control. The man laughed, and the Falin said, Are you thirsty? There is water. He lifted a blue pitcher from a small table, half hidden by the strange objects, and poured water into a brown cup. I have to raise the head of the bed so you can drink. This is a human device. They have many strange things. Yes, it moves, but it is harmless. Here, drink. I'll hold it for you, said the Falin, lowering the cup to his lips. With a jolt he pulled back, turned his head away, shut his eyes and waited for the beating. It did not come. His heart felt suddenly swollen. It made his breathing quiver. After a moment he heard water pouring, and dared to take a look. The Falin was emptying some of the water into the pitcher. Then again he held out the cup, though not as close. "Take it," he said. "Take the cup." He remained still. "Are you not thirsty? Take the cup." He was thirsty. Was the Falin really handing him a cup with water? And was he being asked to take it? Was he really supposed to take it? He lifted a hand, it was very thin and trembling, and reached for it. The Falin let him have it. It felt heavy. He looked inside and saw a little water. The inside of the cup was white. Was it made of paper? He looked at his hand and then raised his other hand. They were scarred, and jagged purple rings were carved in both his wrists, but the ropes weren't there. There was a cup there in his hands. Inside it was water, and he could drink it. He took a sip, then another. Then the cup was empty. "Do you want more?" The Falin poured more water into the cup. He drank it. "Are you hungry? I will ask for some food." The Falin walked to the door and there spoke to someone in a language that was not Alassian. When he came back, he said, "My name is Tawori. If you have questions, I can answer them. That is, if you feel like talking, of course. I will be here until you're well, or I can leave if you'll want me to. Just for now I'm here, I mean." His face hardened. He walked away and went to sit in the green chair, put his elbows on his knees, held one hand in the other and looked down. He was blurry, as was everything else in the room. His sobs forced him to breathe in gasps. The tears dripped down his cheeks and onto the sheets like raindrops. Was he really out of the darkness? Was he truly somewhere else? How did he get here? Where was he? Was he going to stay here, or was he going back into the darkness? Could he stay here? Could he? He didn't want to go back. He didn't want to go back into the darkness. He didn't want to be cold and to be hungry and to be thirsty and to be beaten. He didn't want his wrists tied and his ankles tied. He couldn't breathe. He hurt. He was afraid, drowning. Darkness pressed around him. It was heavy and he was sinking. He wasn't alone. Someone was with him. He could hear a heart weeping. He opened his eyes and glanced at the chair. The Falin was crying, his eyes red and filled with tears, his mouth wearing a scowl as if he were angry. For a moment they looked at each other, the Falin weeping silently, and he shaking with hysterical sobs. Then the Falin bent his head, hiding his face. His sobs began to abate, and he dried his cheeks. He felt cold. His hands went to the blanket with a familiarity that was notable, and pulled it over his chest and shoulders. A blanket, a bed, warmth and comfort, and somehow these weren't unfamiliar things. He turned to look at the light that came through the window and listened. He could hear the Falin, his heart quieter now, and he could hear a human at the door, bored, perhaps, or sleepy. His senses stretched no farther. He felt nothing else. What he did feel was comforting. Not the human, for he was alien, but the Falin, the one called Tawori. His heart was warm. He closed his eyes and listened to it, turning a deaf ear to anything else. A mouth-watering scent reached his nostrils. He opened his eyes. He was in the white room of the human place. He had forgotten that he was there. The Falin, Tawori, stood by the bed offering a cup half filled with a creamy orange soup that smelled of carrots and poultry. "Drink this." He took the cup and slowly sipped the hot food, sniffing the vapor anxiously. The warmth, the smell, the taste, they made the tears come again. He didn't know why he cried, gasping silent sobs between sips. He felt better after he'd emptied the cup, though he wished there had been more. Perhaps the Falin heard his wish, for he produced more of the orange soup out of the grey metallic bottle and gave it to him. He had 2 half cups and then a full one. Then he put the cup on the small table, which had been moved nearer the bedside. He lay back against the pillows and watched the Falin open a book on his lap and begin to read, glancing up at him every now and then. He woke up. It took him some time to understand where he was. Before he did, he sat on the edge of the bed with one foot on the floor. It was a cold floor. "It's all right," said Tawori. The Falin stood in front of him, with a hand raised toward him. "You are safe, remember?" He remembered. He sat still. The day had darkened, and a soft light encased in white glass shone from the ceiling. There was a human in the room, the same man from before. His skin was a bizarre olive tone that glimmered golden in the soft yellow light. His hair was black and oddly short for the years he looked, and a thick beard, also black, covered not only his chin, but his jawline, cheeks, and upper lip. From beneath his black brows, 2 brown eyes stared sorely. "Will you let the human examine you?" Tawori asked. "He's a healer and has been tending to you in the time you have been recovering here, although you might not remember him." He did not like this human. He did not know if he liked any human. He liked the Falin because he was kind. The 2 spoke for a while in what was likely the human tongue. Then the man began asking questions, and the Falin translated his words into Alassian. He did not like the things being asked. They made him feel uncomfortable. What was his name? Where was he from? What was the last thing he remembered before waking up here? Did he remember anything at all? Did he know where he was? Did he feel any pain? Did he understand Tawari's words? He looked into the Falin's eyes and nodded. The Falin smiled, and a flicker of amusement touched his mind. He spoke to the human, then the questions stopped. He was asked to sit back, which he did. The human shone a light in his eyes. The light blinded him, so he turned his face away and for some time avoided looking back. He was asked to move his legs and feet and other parts of his body. Then the human tried to touch his face. He recoiled with a jolt and felt his eyes go wide with fear. After some time, he was told to press his hands against the man's hands. He would rather not do that. He kept his hands in his lap and looked down at them, waiting for the request to be forgotten. When it was forgotten, Tawori asked if he would like to have the thing in his belly removed. The Falin called it a tube. He had thought it to be some kind of living parasite, and was relieved to learn it wasn't so. Tawari said he would have to lie still for it to be done, and would have to let the healer touch him. He himself wasn't sure whether this was wise, but he kept feeling the thing hard under his clothes and was afraid of it, even if it wasn't a living parasite. He wanted it gone, so he nodded. He lay down with his eyes fixed on the human above him, waiting and breathing through fear. The man rubbed a wet cloth on his belly, cut with one light motion, and pushed down gently. He saw, crawling over his half-naked body, the black mass of something wide and heavy. He felt it poke at his navel, widening a hole and rummaging inside him. He heard a piercing scream and sat up gasping, looking at a square dressing on his scarred abdomen. He stared at it, stupidly. "It will heal quickly," Tawari said. "You did well. Breathe." He let air escape his lungs, then sucked in a shallow breath, numb with relief. When he could think again, he realized he was being asked to stand up. "I will catch you if you stumble," Tawari was saying. "You won't fall." He was confused, but had time to think. He decided he wanted very much to stand up. He got his legs out from under the covers and sat on the side of the bed, with his naked feet on the cold pavement, looking down at the brown tiles, looking at his feet, looking at his thin legs in the light blue clothing covering him. He was unsure as to whom he was watching. The man who had healed the hole in his belly sighed. He remembered he had agreed to stand up, so he promptly put his weight on his feet and stood tentatively, very slowly. His legs were weak. He did not fall, but felt as if he might. He was asked to take a few steps. He slogged to the foot of the bed and back. Then he was out of breath and sat again. Nothing more was asked of him. The human spoke with the Falin for a while, then left. "I shall take you to the washroom," Tawari said. He froze. His gaze went from the Falin to the door, to the Falin, to the door. He did not know what was outside this room. If he left it, he was unsure whether he could return to it. He liked this place. He wanted to be here where he knew there were safety and comfort. He didn't want to go anywhere. He lay back on the bed and pulled up the sheets, keeping an eye on the Falin. Tawari watched him in silence for a long moment. Then he returned to his chair. Sometime later, he was given food. Green soup and a bit of plain rice, which he ate with appetite. Afterward, he rested his back against the pillows and sat drowsily. "Should I turn off the light? It is nighttime." "Are you sure? If you want it off, just point at the ceiling, and I will turn it off so you can sleep." He never did point at the ceiling, though he did fall asleep. He slept in the dark place, with his wrists and ankles bound in thick ropes and irons that tightened if he tried to move. He could see nothing, hear nothing. He was utterly alone. When he awoke, he found that his body was free and painless, and that he could see the night room around him in shades of grey, tinged with yellow and blue. The light in the ceiling had gone out, but the world wasn't as dark as it thought it would be without it. Maybe only the cold place deep underground was pitch black to the point of blindness. This darkness here wasn't so dense. It wasn't so frightening. He did not wish to see the nightmares again, so he lay awake listening. The Falin slept slouched in the chair, his mind busy with dreams and his heart silent. When dawn broke through the window, he carefully stood from the bed to find his footing safer than before. He stepped unsteadily on the cold floor until his hands clasped the window sill. Outside, the clear sky was slowly brightening. 20 feet below, the ground was covered in dark grey pebbles and patches of beige sand. A short walk away was a metal fence with a brown barrier, and beyond that was desert earth, freckled with clusters of grass, and barren mountains in the distance. What a queer land! Where were the trees? Surely there should be trees, but he saw none. Where did the wildlife find shelter without them? What manner of creatures could live in such emptiness? He watched the quiet, still world with one hand pressed against the cold window and his breath painting fog over it. When he saw the sun rise in the east, a globe of red fire piercing the crested horizon, his heart beat in elation and a thrill coursed through him. His eyes were drawn to the sun. He watched it rise in the bright blue sky. Then the world went black. A dry pain stabbed his eye sockets, cutting deep into his skull and tearing a groan from his chest. His hands flew up to hide his face. At once he stopped the flow of energy rushing to his eyes, then concentrated on calming his breathing. The pain began to subside. The pain began to subside. He dried his tears and looked up. Outside the window the world remained unchanged, though its beauty had diminished. He was unsure of what he had done and why. He thought that something should have happened, but didn't. A hunch tugged at him like a hefty emptiness. He stood there a while, looking outside on cold feet. He could not remember. What? He did not know. He should know something. Anything. There was an emptiness inside him. The sunlight whispered to him things he should know, but he did not know them. There was something wrong with him, with his mind, with his eyes. He stood still for a long time, unaware of himself if not for the cold beneath his feet. When a cloud moved in front of the sun, dimming the morning light, he turned away and walked to the bed. He crawled under the sheets, curled into a ball, and slept. He never noticed the Falin watching him.